Hi, everyone. Okay. Um, my name is Ram Mahalingam. I'm the director for Burge Leadership Institute. I'm also a professor of psychology. Welcome. This is our first public event after the COVID break. So we are very excited to have you all. And I'm very excited to have Rebecca Irby here, which we have been planning for about 2 years ago. We planned this event, and we persist, and she also um, kept in touch with us so that we want to make sure that we actually do it. So um, um, I'm going to introduce briefly Rebecca. She's also going to talk about what she's doing, and she can introduce a little more. Um, so I think when I was in college here doing my graduate years, the globalization came. So when the globalization came, everybody talked about you need to think globally, but act locally. So that's then the next term came glocal. So you're global, but you're also local. So you have a term glocal. But I never seen anyone who actually really doing glocal. That is Rebecca. She really embodies the spirit. She not only thinks globally, she acts globally, and she also works locally, right? So let me give you an introduction. She's a founder member of a Peak Institute that works in Hiroshima. She works the Peace Foundation there, so she does a lot of work. She's an activist, educator, filmmaker. She focuses on peace as an intervention to open our hearts and how to facilitate authentic communication between cultural groups, between cultures across countries, and within cultural groups within the US, so where we also have difficulties talking to each other sometime. She is excellent in facilitating that. She has done so much work in terms of how to use the nuclear explosion and the atomic nuclear abolition as a process of engaging peace leadership across the world. And she completed a cross-cultural communication textbook for Japanese Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. She has done so much work in different organizations. She's a filmmaker. She acted in movies. So it's kind of a very rare person who is actually doing everything. Not only that is important, but it's also actively intervening in whatever she does. So a lot of people do make films for fun, for their expressing who they are, whereas Rebecca actually uses anything she does as an intervention, whether it's about communication or whether it is how to open our hearts, things like that. So I'm greatly admire what she does, and so we are honored to have her here. It's a privilege to introduce her today. Please give her a warm Michigan welcome before she can start her workshop. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ram, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I am going to take my mask off for a little bit, but when I come out to interact with you all, I will be sure to put it back on. But thank you so much for showing up this evening, for taking some time out of your busy days to spend some time together this evening. So today we are on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. So today is also Veterans Day. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I have a story to share about that. But before we begin, I have a blessing song that was shared with me by one of the groups I work with, and it's the Alaskan Heritage Center High School Dance Group. So this was created during the pandemic. It's a song of healing and blessing and purification, but it was an offering of healing for all of us during the pandemic. So it's 3.5 minutes. I invite you to listen, let the sound fill your ears and your heart as we prepare ourselves to dig in a little bit deeper and find out what it means to be a heart-centered leader. So I'm going to be sharing this presentation with you all after, so you'll notice that there's a lot more writing on the slides than I will be. I will not be reading it, but the information is there so that you can dig into it afterwards. There's links and other things to dig into these topics a little bit more deeply. The one thing I will be reading off of the screen, though, are these community agreements. So you will notice on your table there are little sticks with green paint at the end. Those are your scepters, so please grab one. We'll be using it throughout our time together today. I do ask that you give them back to me at the end, but they are yours for the entire time that we are together. So, our community agreements. I would love to get some volunteers, one person to read each one. So, may I? Wonderful. I am loving your shirt right there. I think your shirt and my mask are good friends. And thank you for being the first one to venture out there.
So starting with the first one then, respect. We may be coming from diverse backgrounds. Respect for differing opinions is of the utmost importance. Being able to discuss our differences with empathy will ensure we are respecting each other's different cultures and ways of being.
Thank you. Who would like to read honesty for us? Thank you.
Honesty, speak from your personal experience. Don't try to paraphrase what you think someone else may be going through or someone else's experience. Use I statements.
Thank you. How about speaking in the first draft?
Speaking in the first draft, you may not have figured out exactly what to say. Don't use that as a reason not to try.
Thank you. And the gentleman next to you?
Yeah, so stay present intellectually, emotionally, and physically.
Do we have someone for engage? Thank you.
Engage. If something resonates with you, hold up your green pointer.
So that's the way we'll be in. We're going to be doing a lot of interacting. I am going to get you guys up and out of your seats as well. But if something like really makes sense to you and you're like, oh, I really like that, just use your stick to hold it up. It's really helpful as we're getting back into being in person with one another, going from using the chat and putting things in there. So this is our transition space and time. So this is just something you just be like, oh yeah, I like that. And that helps everybody else know also what's speaking to you, because we're gonna be speaking to each other a lot. And our last one, who wants to read stretch for me? Thank you.
Stretch, create space that fills space. Share and be open as it feels comfortable. But leave space for others to step on and share too.
Great. So that idea is also this idea of if you're normally a person who volunteers and you speak all the time, take a step back. If you're the person who's always waiting, you don't usually volunteer, we're creating a really safe space here today. Today is an opportunity for you to try. Try raising your hand first and see what it feels like. So that's the idea between engage and stretch. So with that, those are our community agreements that I have. Are there any that you would like to add to the table? So I'll just take a quick scan. I'm not seeing anything. So if we are all in agreement that we can hold these agreements while we're with each other today, please hold up your green pointers. This will be our first point. Excellent. I'm just looking for agreement from anyone. And wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So our agenda today, we're going to be looking at what I call my North Star, how this has helped and affected my life. I'm going to be sharing some stories, and while I'm sharing some of those stories, we'll also be going through what I call heart-centered leadership, revolutionary love, and wonder. And we'll get into that a little bit more. One of the things I would love for you to walk away with today is this idea of your North Star, how to use it and how we find it. So we are going to be spending a good deal of time in the second half of the session today really focusing in on your North Star. So I'm going to start with telling you about mine to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. But as I mentioned, today is Veterans Day, so I did want to share a very small story and why this is such an important topic for me. This is a picture of my father and I, and it's the last photograph that I have with him. It was from 1997. I was about to leave for a year abroad. I was chosen as a Rotary international exchange student for my junior year of high school. And he was dropping me off. Well, both of my parents were dropping me off at the airport, but my mom took this picture. I share this because it's Veterans Day today, and I think I say my father passed away from what I come to call death by despair or suicide. He was a Vietnam vet, and the services available to veterans when they return home from war are almost non-existent. And today, on this day, or tomorrow, since it's the end of the day, when you look at and you think about all of the people who have served, who make our lives possible so that we don't have to see the atrocities of war, I think it's really criminal what we do when they return, and that we really need to support our soldiers, which is interesting to say, as I am a peace activist. I know this might sound a little odd, but I do come from a military family, and the men and women who are serving and protecting our country deserve help when they come home. They, at the very least, deserve what we've promised them. So my request, my small request, and as I said, I'll be sending this, so the link will be there, but call your congressperson, tell them to fund the VA. There are a lot of bills going on right now. The link will be in here about where you can get more information, but if you're feeling moved, it could be a simple 2-second phone call of just telling your congressperson to fund the VA, or the Veterans Affairs Office. So on that note, I am ready to dig into our North Star. So how many of you have even heard of this concept? Obviously not the star in the sky, but the idea of a North Star, or something that kind of guides you along your path. So kind of, we have about half. One of the people who said that they've heard of this, are you willing to tell me what you've heard? What kind of idea or concept is this? Yeah.
I'd say like your purpose, why you get out of bed every day and do what you do. I think like maybe an overarching goal as well.
Yeah. I think that's a really great and very general way of thinking about it. And that's where we're going to start today. I'm going to talk about how to use something like a goal, and how it really helped kind of inform my life and my path. So as Ram was saying, I think my career is very varied. If you look at it on paper, it may even look sporadic. I often talk about how the work that I do, I feel like it really chose me. And when I was young, I knew that I wanted to have an impact on the world, but I really didn't know how. I didn't know what that looked like. I just knew I was always an activist. From as early as I can remember. My mother was telling me all kinds of stories when I was a little girl about waking up in the middle of the night and telling her about dreams that I had about people in pain and that we needed to help them. And this was going back for 3-4 years old. And by the time I was 6, I was out on the streets protesting, cutting down trees, just anything and everything. It was just kind of a part of my ethos. So the feeling that I wanted to impact peace, which felt like such a grand statement. It's not actionable. It's just like, okay, little girl. Okay, you want to make the world more peaceful? That sounds like something that like Miss America would say, which is what people would say to me often. And it was kind of brushed aside and just like, that's cute, but figure out what you want to do with your life, because that's not a goal. I was like, okay. And as I went through, I started out in art school. That didn't quite work out for me. I got into a very large argument with my teachers and professors about the meaning of art, and I felt that they were not giving some of my classmates enough credit for the things that they had done, and it wasn't a good space. I ended up actually in psychology and sociology, which was a much better fit for me. In that space, I was able to really explore. I was given many opportunities. I had amazing professors that really saw the drive that I had, and they gave me, I kind of forced my way into a graduate lab as an undergrad, and that really changed the course of my life and what I was able to do from that. Now, at this point, I'm still in my mind, no one had told me about a North Star. I still had this amorphous goal of making the world more peaceful, and I decided I'm gonna do that through education. So I got a degree in early childhood development, and I really wanted to have an impact. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have an impact in education. In the way that we educate our children, I'm gonna work on pedagogy, I'm gonna work on curriculum. This is gonna be amazing. And then I realized, coming right out of college, it's a really difficult job to get. And I was like, oh, okay. I was offered a marketing job. So I was offered 2 different positions right out of college. One was with a nonprofit, and it did not pay very well at all, but I would be doing direct work. And the other was with a marketing company that paid really, really well. And they had a social good program, and they made it just sound really amazing and so attractive. And I was like, you know, I'm gonna go make money. I'll have the money that I need, and then I'll have the time to work on my goals. That was my plan. And I was like, okay, so it felt like a good plan. It was a really great company. I get there, and then while we're going through the motions, I'm learning what I'm supposed to be doing. I end up working directly with the executive, and I'm starting to learn about the business practices. And I don't know if this is in all marketing, but there are a lot of shady things happening at the company. And they wanted me to put my name on reports that were doctored. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And they're like, well, if you want this job. And I was like, oh, perfect. Don't want the job, then I'm good. And they're like, you can't. I was like, I can most certainly. Friends and family were not very happy that I quit my job on a whim. They say on a whim. For me, it wasn't. It was that moment where I had to really make a decision. Am I going to be true to myself, or am I going to do what my superior is telling me I need to do in order to keep this? I could have stayed in the position, they would have let me keep the job, but I knew for myself that that wasn't a space that I could really be in, that I could thrive. I live my life through passion, and I was not able to put aside my ethics to do that. And that was something that, you know, I think was a good lesson to learn for myself and also to see. But that has real life ramifications. I was out of work. I had to go back to the university. I started to look at things. I started to speak with my professors. And again, they're just like, Rebecca, what do you want to do? You have so many talents, and still, like, you got this amazing job and you just left it. And I was like, well, what? Professor Elias, please, like, come on, you have to be on my side for this one. And after I explained what happened, and he was like, okay. His recommendation was that I should have looked for another job first. Granted, probably true. There is something to be said for supporting yourself, and that is, we'll get to that in a moment as well. But what I have found throughout my varied career is that as I was more clear with what I wanted, and I was given really amazing opportunities to explore, so I highly, highly recommend, if you have the opportunity to do an internship, if you have the opportunity to study abroad, if you have the opportunity to do an internship abroad, oh my goodness, take it. Now is the time to do that. You have so much time and space right now. It might not feel like you do, but there are so many programs, and I am happy to share what they are, that help all kinds of students from all different backgrounds so that you're able to travel abroad. I cannot speak highly enough of what that does for you. Being able to interact with, and not just going on vacation, I mean really interacting with other cultures. Going to another space, not spending your time in like the Americanized version of that space, but really being in that space with people. So important. And as you travel, you grow as a person. You start to learn more and more about yourself. I had such a great privilege of being able to do that in my life. And the time that I spent traveling really allowed me to feel very passionately and feel very firmly and know that there was something that I was meant to do in this world. So again, very varied, very difficult, but there was a burning desire in my heart. And as I kept coming back to that, I was very fortunate to work with a mentor and a coach. It took me until my 30s, which is why I love coming to universities to talk to you guys, is I hope I can save you 10 years. But when I finally started working with a coach and a mentor, we talked about this idea of a North Star. And because I would take positions and I would get really frustrated, I would feel like I wasn't living my passion, and it would always turn out that those positions that I took, basically for the price tag that was attached to them, it would end up blowing up in my face in some way, somehow. And I would just get so frustrated, and like, how am I supposed to figure this out? So the process of figuring that out was really sitting and understanding where my passion lied. So yes, it was in education, and yes, it was working or helping people, but specifically how. I had to like really figure out specifically what that looked like. So we went through a number of exercises. We had to do a lot of writing and reflecting, and it felt arduous and not the type of work that I normally like to do. I'm very like I want to work with my hands. I don't want to sit and like play in feelings. But I learned that that is incredibly important, to sit and to reflect and to understand what drives us. So this idea that passion, when we know our passion and when we feel that we're fulfilling our purpose, life is much more fulfilling. There's much more happiness. So through that process, and this is when, at this point, it's 2008. I'm still working on and off at Rutgers University. That was my alma mater. So I would take another job. It wouldn't work out. I would come back. My professors and it was the Social Emotional Learning Lab and the Center for Applied Psychology. They were like, you always have a home here. We'll find something for you, but please figure yourself out. You're like, okay. So it's actually right before 2008, I was working on a research project, and the research project got really, really big. It got picked up by the state. We got funding with millions of dollars, which sounded so exciting, but then when you find out that you have to work with every single school, millions of dollars actually ends up to only be about $40,000 per school, which is not a lot of money to do an intervention, I will say. But that turned into a national program that's mandated. Then that turned into a credential. It turned into a brand new career in education that I was getting to work on, and I got to start. I got to be a huge part of that. And then 2008 comes, the economy falls. Our guaranteed funding, we were in a 10-year longitudinal study. The end of year 8, funding pulled. We got notice that that was our last check and that there was no more money. I felt like someone had just like stolen my baby or cut off my right arm. I'm right-handed. I didn't know what to do with myself, because at this point in the journey, I felt like I'd found my purpose. I'd finally found it. And it was back at the school, and I was working on this research that I was working on as an undergrad. We were so close to our goal, this really amazing research that everybody was so excited about, and then it was just gone. And I felt very lost again. So I end up in Japan at this point. A friend was working there. She got me a job. Not knowing any Japanese, not having ever studied anything about Japan, I moved there. And that is when I found all of the different pieces of my life, all of the different things that I've been doing throughout my activism, writing curriculum, all of these things coalesced together when I ended up in Japan. And an opportunity presented itself in a very unusual way. So that's the other part about when we're living our passion is, and having a North Star to guide us, we're able to see opportunities where we would usually miss them. So I get to Japan, I'm working, it's not bad. I start working with a coach because I'm feeling extremely unfulfilled. I was teaching English in Japan, but I was 30. Most of my coworkers were right out of college, so they were 21, 22. There was a very big divide. It was a lot of fun, but I was getting tired. We finished work around 11 o'clock or midnight because people were coming to class after school and after work. It just wasn't a good fit for me. I tried to find something else. They begged me to stay and created a new role for me, which was really exciting to see. And this is because I was very clear. I was getting extremely clear on what I wanted and what my purpose was and what my passion was. And for the first time, I was able to speak it out loud and tell other people. So when I went into a meeting and I was like, this isn't working for me because this is what I am passionate about, this is what I want to do, and like this is the only thing that I'm going to do. And they said, well, those sound like really great things. We'd love if you do those things for us. So what I wanted to do was work on curriculum. I wanted to train teachers, and I wanted to impact the way in which organizations were moving forward, their social skills, their interaction skills. And they said, that sounds amazing, Rebecca. Will you do that for us? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, will you create a position and then name your price and we'll pay you and do that? And I said, is that what happens when you ask for what you want? Yes. Yes, it is. That's what happens when you are able to ask for what you want. So I know we had this picture before, but it's so incredibly true. When we know our passion, when we know our purpose, and we are constantly working towards it, and we're putting our energy towards that, the universe also comes to meet us halfway. It gives us signs. It shows us that we're on the right path, and it helps conspire to make it happen. I've had this experience so many times throughout my life. I feel very fortunate, but now I also am starting to see and realize this is something, it's not a fluke. It's not something, I'm not just lucky. I come from my father was a Vietnam vet. I grew up without him most of my life. My sister is severely disabled, probably because of some of the chemicals my father was exposed to in Vietnam. I grew up on welfare. I grew up in an extremely wealthy town, but on welfare, which was very difficult. My mother moved from an inner city, which was only 5 miles away. I don't know if you're familiar with the state of New Jersey, but there's some of the wealthiest and some of the poorest neighborhoods that are literally down the street from each other. My family is from one of the poorest areas. My mother moved us to the border so that I could go to school in Montclair. It's another reason I'm so connected to education, and I know the difference that education makes. It's not just what you're learning, it's who you're connecting to, it's what you're seeing, it's what you're experiencing in the different spaces that you choose to learn. I know and I can see a huge difference between myself and my cousins. We grew up at the exact same time. We grew up 5 miles apart from each other. The education we received, radically different. By the time that I was in 3rd grade, we would get together for barbecues over the weekend, and I'd see my cousins who were in 5th grade, 7th grade. I'd see the work that they were doing. It's like, my cousin who's in 5th grade, we were doing the same work. My cousin who's in 7th grade, some of the work that they were doing, I was doing in 3rd grade. How could that be? We're 5 miles away from each other. The difference, the radical difference in education in this country. So that was one of the huge motivating factors in the work that I was doing, and the work that I continue to do to this day, because I know the value and the power that education has. So, as we are starting to understand this, this interconnectivity, the way in which the world conspires to make things happen, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly, but this is a Nobel Peace Prize, which I'm a part of a coalition. We won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. So from being that little girl, wishing to have an impact on the world, to create more peace in the world, I never thought that I would be holding or be able to say that I was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But as I said, the universe really comes together and shows us when we stay true to that passion, when we stay true to what we believe. We're able to make really miraculous things happen. One of the ways that this happens is because we are so incredibly interconnected. So I have an activity for us. We're going to need to stand up. We're going to be walking around, so I will put my mask back on. But if I could ask you all to stand up and push your chairs, we're going to form a circle in the back of the room. This is called the system game. So we're just going to form a circle in the back of the room, please. All right. I'm going to need 2 volunteers, but not yet. It's going to be painless, I promise. So right now, we need to be able to see everyone. So what you're going to do, and this is a secret, so don't look at the person, don't signal to the person, but you need to pick 2 people who are, so you cannot pick the 2 people right next to you. That's the only rule. You can pick any other person, but not the 2 people next to you. So pick any 2 people in the circle. Don't tell them, it's your secret, only your secret. You will never tell who you're connected to, okay? So does everyone have 2 people? Okay, great. So now I need just 2 volunteers. You look like a wonderful volunteer. You've been smiling at me. Can you please come into the circle? Thanks so much. So you stand right there. Can I have one more volunteer? Wonderful. Okay, so this game is about staying equidistant, okay? So right now, we make a triangle, and we are all equidistant. Can you 2 start moving? So just move anywhere. Anywhere. My goal is that I have to stay equidistant to them. So keep moving. Both of you keep moving. So I have to, wherever they go, I'm like, okay, I have to stay equidistant to them. Does everyone get what that means? Okay, so I'm going to give us 40 seconds. When I say go, you put yourself equidistantly in between your 2 people. So we're just all going to be walking, okay? Are you ready? Okay, go. So spread out. You got to spread out a little bit. Move around. I'm going to come in here and break y'all up. Move around, move about. Okay, yep. Okay, stop. Hold up your hand. Stop. Mr. Rom, you moved. I saw you. Okay, raise your hand if you are equidistant in between your 2 partners. Okay. Excellent job, everyone. We can spread out a little bit. We'll practice our social distancing. We're going to do that again. There's going to be a little bit of a twist. So now, instead of Rebecca, I am the Grim Reaper. So, if I come, I'm going to be walking around like this. If I come and I tap you on the shoulder, sneakily, because you won't see it. If you feel me tap you on the shoulder, really important, count to 3, and then take yourself out of play. Just like this, right where you stand. So you would still walk 3 steps, and then you'd take yourself out of play. Does that make sense? Okay. Second, if one of the people you are connected to sits down, you take 3 steps, and you sit down. Okay? Does that make sense? Third rule, we need to make more space. So we'll use kind of the outside as our bigger space to start walking around, but it'll be exactly the same. So when I count to 3, we'll go and just start moving, okay? 1, 2, 3, go. Don't forget your people. You're still staying in between those 2 people. Still staying in between those 2 people. You guys got to spread out more. Spread out, spread out. You're making it too easy for me to catch you. Okay. How many taps do you think I did? So shout out. How many taps? 1. So I've got 1, 4, 3. Any others? What do you think? It was 2. So you guys were in between. We can stand up. Thank you. So the idea behind this game and what I find really fascinating, we can all take a seat. I've done this with 10 people. I've done this with our size group. I've done this with 200 people. How many taps do you think it takes to get a room of 200 people to sit down? This group was 2. It's between 4 to 6 normally to get 200 people to sit down. So one of the reasons I love playing this game, and you can do it with any size group, is it really shows us just how interconnected we are. And one of the reasons I like to talk about this is if we think about just how connected we are, and also I feel like the pandemic really helped show this as well. Sorry. Just how incredibly interconnected our entire world is. So with just 2 taps, we were able to make about 40 people sit down. So meaning only 2 out of our group of 2, we were connected enough to affect each other. So if we think about that, also during the pandemic, we were all affecting and infecting one another. But I like to think about this in a very, very different way, separate from the pandemic and that type of interconnectivity. I like to think about it as what we were just talking about with the universe conspiring to help us. The reason that that's possible is because of this interconnectivity. We are truly, it's not just a woo-woo thing to say, like we truly are all connected to one another. And as we figure out our passion, as we figure out our purpose, we are connected to the rest of the world. So I was told that I wasted my life, all of these things that I was working on when I decided to start working on nuclear abolition, so trying to rid the world of nuclear weapons. I was told I was insane. I was wasting my life. I was naive. Never, ever, ever, ever going to happen. It's like, wow, okay. However, I didn't believe it. I love challenges. And it's like, this one, I'm just going to jump right on in. And I did. And I didn't give up. And I found lots of other people who also were being told that they were naive, that they were stupid, that they were wasting their life. And altogether, we managed to ban nuclear weapons, make them illegal. They've joined the rest of the weapons of mass destruction. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, all of them are now weapons of mass destruction that are banned. The reason that this is so huge is so take this university, for example. They have started to divest from nuclear weapons because all universities, any organization that has a social good policy, you're not allowed to be invested in something that's illegal. That's why that fight was so incredibly important. And it's amazing to see something that people thought was truly impossible was made possible because there was a group of stubborn women who just said, no, I refuse to give up. I will not listen to you. I know that people agree with us because we would go places and everyone we would talk to agreed with us. We're like, so if everybody agrees, there has to be a way to do it. And there was. And there is. There always is. So that's what I'm here to talk to you all about today. We are coming up to time. I'm happy that I have this to give to you because these are some really amazing and wonderful activities that I do not think we'll get time to go through. But one of the things I do want to spend a little time talking about before we get into the North Star is this idea of revolutionary love. And the reason I bring this up, has anyone heard of this concept? So I see some head shakings. Can anyone tell me what revolutionary love, when you've heard of it, what have you heard? So I saw some head shaking at my table right here and table right there. Okay. Anyone else? Any ideas? What does this mean, revolutionary love? All right. Well, it's a new term, so don't feel bad if you don't know it. It is the idea that love is fierce. It's not about like the romantic puppies and rainbows and like really beautiful. It's a messy, dirty love. The type of love that would be out in the street protesting. The type of love that is tirelessly working on policy. That type of love. And why it's called revolutionary, because it's talking about loving our enemies, but not at the detriment to ourselves. Loving those who have no one else to love or care for them, but again, not at the detriment to ourselves. So understanding that dichotomy, like we're not able to help others if we're not full ourselves. So it's this idea that you are fiercely standing for yourself and others, that you fiercely advocate for even some who you might call an enemy, people who, there are many different sides to a fight, but if we can come with love for all of the sides, we may find a different solution than the one that we feel is the only one that's presented at the time. This concept comes from the Sikh religion, and it's really something that I've come to gravitate towards and absolutely love. And this idea of wonder. Wonder it's called the great insulator for hate. So wonder helps us stay present. Wonder helps us practice love for others. So I like to think about this not just like, what are they up to? But truly like a deep wonder about another person. And you will find it's difficult to wonder about people that we dislike. But that's the practice. it's very easy to wonder what my best friend is doing, what she's up to, because I care about her and I want to know. But someone that I don't agree with politically, it's very easy for me to make them not even a human in my mind, make them something else, an other. I would never think like that. I would never do that. So it's very easy to dehumanize. And once you've made that distinction in your mind, it's very easy to start hating. And that's how we get incredibly polarized. But if we can start to wonder about the people on the other side, maybe we'll learn a thing or two. I have found it fascinating. I moved here from Manhattan. I've only been here less than a year. I am coming from a very liberal enclave, and I moved to a pretty conservative space. The conversations I have with my neighbors out here, very different. It seems like people want to have conversations and they think that they will go a certain way and that maybe they'll make me upset. But I've managed to have some really engaging conversations with my neighbors, even though we very much don't agree on the way of the world at the moment. But we've managed to have civil conversations. They keep coming back and wanting to talk to me more. And the way that I was able to get through was just by asking questions and really, truly wanting to know about them. You know, I took it away from the politics because it's super easy to get polarized and to get separated in that space. It's much different. I was talking about pie. It's something I learned when I moved here. It's like, people really love pie here. Like, cool, I love pie. I was married before, and at my wedding, I didn't have a wedding cake. We had pie because I love pie. And I was like, I can talk to these people about pie. Like, that's my in. And it's been working really, really well. I've been getting all kinds of amazing recipes, and it's that kind of on-ramp to a conversation instead of, you know, I have a Black Lives Matter sign on my yard and you have a Trump sign on your yard. And, you know, when I first moved in, my neighbor, I don't think they were very happy. But I've gotten some really excellent pie recipes from her. And I told her I would make it and bring her some. So it's about forging these relationships, even though we have these vast differences. She's starting to ask me a lot more questions about my life, and I'm able to give her a lot more information, and information that she, unfortunately, people have not been honest with her. So it takes work, certainly, but the practice of wonder, please take a look at this when it's sent your way. It's some really beautiful exercises, really simple, and something you can do on your own. They're just thought exercises, but a really wonderful way of exercising your heart muscle. So we've got a little bit more time. I want to spend the rest of our time looking at and working on our own North Star. So in front of you or on your table, you should have a handout that looks like this. So a lot of these questions have been compiled and we're coming together from different departments. So questions coming from psychology departments, from sociology, anthropology, self-help. If you look online, if you go online and do like find my passion test, you'll see a lot of these same questions on here as well. So what we're going to do, I believe there are 18 questions on here. We are most certainly not going to be doing all of them. I don't recommend that. I mean, if you wanted to sit down and do all 18, you could. That'd be a day. You'd have to dedicate a day to that. I don't really recommend doing that. This exercise, what we're going to be doing today, I want you to pick one or two. We're going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes. I'll be walking around to help as well. So I will put my mask back on, but we're going to sit. I'm going to put some music on. We're going to go through these questions. There's space for you to answer right there. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come over. But we're going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes just going through. The idea being read all of the questions. I know. Read all the questions first and then pick one that you want to work on, one that really speaks to you and like, oh, I'm excited to answer that. If during the time you happen to be able to answer two, awesome. So I'm going to start the music. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? So while you guys are working, Beth and I are going to be coming around and dropping some things off at your table. Don't be distracted by us. Just pay attention to your writing, and we'll get to what that activity will be when we're done. going to make a reminder for ourselves. So looking at what All right. So we are coming to the end of our time together. It went so fast, I can't believe it. But I did want to spend just a few minutes. We're going to do a Q&A, but I wanted to just wrap up by sharing a little bit about how I use my rock. My friend over here with our decision paralysis, what was your name? Christian. So I stopped by every table and we had some conversations, and my conversation with Christian's table, he reminded me of a really excellent term. And one of the main reasons why this exercise was really life-changing for me. I was describing it and he was like, oh, decision paralysis. And I was like, yes, that is what I was plagued with for such a long time. The idea, so many opportunities and things would come up and I would just be like, oh my God, like they both look so good. And I don't know how I would possibly choose, how do I make that decision? So I shared about choosing money over my passion and where that led me. I found that this was such an easy tool. It seems almost counterintuitive that it could be so helpful, but an opportunity would come up, so I would use this for jobs. I would use this about where I wanted to go, who I wanted to start interacting with and spending more time with. It's like, okay, I know what my goal is. Does this help me get closer to that? Yes or no? Very simple. And when you break it down and be like, okay, no, this $100,000 contract sitting in front of me does not help me get closer to this. Do I really say no? Like, okay, I am trusting you out there. You told me this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm gonna say no. And I did. And as I started to feel more confident in the way that I was filtering things and the way I was making decisions, more and more opportunities and more started coming. And as I showed before, the idea that the universe is conspiring to help you, it is. So as you tell it what you're passionate about and you're more and more clear, it becomes easier and easier. But if something comes and it's completely off of the track that you had stated, that's why it ends up kind of blowing up. Well, the experience that I had is that it blows up in my face. It doesn't even allow me to be in that space because it wasn't prepared. The universe was like, hey, you told me you wanted to be way over there. Why are you over here? I'm not ready for you over here. Like, I've got to rearrange everything to put you over here. And that's what it's like. So having something to filter your decisions, very easy. Does this help me get closer? And it was something that I would do all the time. Like, okay, it does or it doesn't. And then I got more and more confident in just making those decisions and going with them. And as I was sharing with that table and I touched on, that equaled a little girl who grew up on welfare, winning a Nobel Peace Prize, being a consultant for the United Nations, getting to speak to prime ministers, to presidents around the world, working on policy around the world, having a huge impact. Not something I ever thought would be possible. But with this very simple filtration tool, way of living and feeling grounded in my passion, I was able to get to those places because I also would never give up, tenaciously moving towards that because as you practice it more, you see and it's working more and more and you get more connected to it. And it gets easier and easier to do over time. So with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. We have fun. Wait.
Chuck mic.
Chuck mic. So if you have any questions, please, now is your time.
Or if you just want to catch the mic.
Because that's super fun.
Are you ready, Mary?
I'm not really. I'm feeling a lot of social pressure to catch this.
It's up to the thrower.
Thank you. This has been really wonderful, and I like that you broke up the presentation with some activities. It's always nice to get out and interact with people in a post-pandemic world. It feels like an opportunity to be more connected, even though we're not touching and wearing masks. So, really appreciated that. I was curious and interested when you told your story about the Nobel Peace Prize and how you were working on denuclearizing. Is that the right word? And you mentioned, this wonderful benefit that was connected in that universities like the University of Michigan would have to divest from funding. And I'm wondering, we do a lot of project work with students. When you went into that, did you know that that was a means to the end? Like when you decided to do this work, did you know that financially folks would have to divest, and that would be one of the great ways that your solution worked?
So that is a wonderful question, and it has two parts to answer. So when we first started out, absolutely not. What we were looking at was, it's called humanitarian disarmament. So it's the idea of stopping the conversation about war and weapons, only talking about security and deterrence, which is the conversation around nuclear weapons. So deterrence being, we have to have these weapons because it stops other people from attacking us, because they know we have these weapons and we would use them, but if we did, we'd destroy the world, which makes no sense to me. And when you tell people that makes no sense to them either, which is what we used, which it's very easy to feel like that's the argument you want to have with people, but we took it completely out of that arena and we're like, no, actually, I want to talk about healthcare. I want to talk about the way in which nuclear weapons affect the body, affect the environment, and we brought in doctors and the Red Cross and asked them to make an assessment of how you would respond to a nuclear disaster. And because you're supposed to, for every type of disaster, you're supposed to have a preparedness plan. And there are no preparedness plans for a nuclear attack, just FYI. So we were like, let's start with that. Our estimation was that it wasn't going to be possible, and that if we could get a large institution like the Red Cross or like a Mayo Clinic to start to look at seriously what it would look like to have a response, and if they were to say, no, there isn't a response that's possible, which is what happened. The Red Cross came out and said that they would not send in any first responders for a nuclear attack because they're not allowed to, according to international law and the ways in which it's written, because the people going in, there's no way to protect them because we don't actually know how to deal with nuclear power and nuclear energy. So we started with that, but then as we went down that path, we saw that it would have a big implication once made illegal that there would also have to be divestment from it. So it became a two-pronged approach, and that's what we built the campaign on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just gonna hand it. That was very generous.
And then when you're done, we've got a question over there for you to check the mic.
Awesome. So I'm in the School of Social Work, and the buzz term, and probably in a lot of other fields too, is self-care, which seems very important to me, and yet no one can tell me how they actually successfully practice. I've asked every one of my professors, like, I love this work, I'm interested in this field, I've been in the field and then returned to school. How do you keep going and not stop? Right? Like, how do you rest and not give up?
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, like, what your advice is or answer to that.
That is such an important question. And I think the reason that people focus on this is because now there's a lot of research and there are studies coming out about some of the biggest activists and people who are like feverishly working on a cause, that they often end up dying of cancer, of like really complicated cancers. And I've just started, it was something that I was starting to notice because I work with a lot of activists and a lot of them are older, and just it felt like every time I would turn around, someone was being diagnosed with cancer. Like, what is happening? I have many thoughts on that, but there's research happening around it. The connection right now that they're looking at is the stress of this type of work and how that affects our body. And we know that stress affects us negatively. And if you continue to have stress hormones just on a constant basis, what does that do to you? We're starting to see that. So my solution is infuse joy into everything. I love doing arts and crafts, so I forced you all to do it with me today. So finding ways, and that's why it's so important to know what your passion is, and not just how you want to change the world, but what lights you up, what gets you excited. Because if you're doing this work and it feels arduous, especially if you're in care work and trying to care for others, and the reason that they talk about self-care being so incredibly important is because you're not able to help others. And if you're not full, if you're not in a good place, you can actually do a detriment to the people that you're working with. So so very tangible advice that I would give. What do you love? I love hiking and I love being in trees. I moved from Manhattan to Michigan because that's what I needed in my life right now. I've spent the last 20 years working feverishly, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I know that it's really important for me to have and to be near the things that fill me. And that's being near fresh water, and that's being like in nature. And I knew that that's what I needed. So a lot of people are asking me, like, you moved from New York to Michigan? What's wrong with you? I was like, it's amazing. I love it. Because that's what I need. And so choosing and picking what you need, but you have to know. And that's what this exercise is all about, like really knowing what your passion is and not being afraid to state it. And it's not going to work for everybody. It's not. It's been difficult for me to find positions because I'm very strange and odd. I've had a very varied career, and the type of people that I would mesh with are a little unusual and a little strange. So, but when I find those positions, they're the most amazing. And it's because I'm unwilling to, I will not compromise anymore. I'm going to be 100% me, because that's where the best work happens. That's where the magic happens. It's when we try to hide parts of ourselves so that we can fit into this space. It's when it doesn't work out and when it eats you up on the inside. So find your passion, what lights you up, and do it. Do more of it. And infuse joy in every way that you can. I think we get very connected to this idea of being professional, and I really try to break that in every sense. I love making the diplomats and foreign ministers do activities like we just did. I make them play with arts and crafts and all kinds of things. And I often am told that it's one of the best sessions that they've ever been in, because they don't ever get to do things like that. It's so important. Have fun. Infuse fun into all you do.
I don't want to hit you though.
So thank you, Rebecca, for that amazing presentation. That was really inspiring. And to the last persons, I'm not sure what your name is. Sorry? Your name's Katie. And to her question, I just watched a TED Talk about the six keys to leadership, and one of them was never give up. And the person mentioned about a Cantor's law, which says that everything looks like a failure in the middle. So if that offers any inspiration or help for Katie or for everyone, that'd be great. And my question for you, Rebecca, was you mentioned about working with a lot of mentors and coaches in your journey of finding your passion and just doing great work. Was there one phrase or one quote that inspired you or made you who you are today in the process?
So the decision paralysis, and that was something that really plagued me. Like, so much, it was difficult for me to even decide what I wanted to eat. I was so incredibly indecisive. And that also had an effect on my relationships. Like, it's not a good look to not know what you want or how you want to show up in the world. So the reason I talk about this, I talk about education. I shared why I feel so passionate about that. But the other side is this North Star idea, because that really, it was such a simple concept. And it was kind of something the woman that I was working with at the time, she was just talking about it. She's like, oh, my North Star this, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm sorry, you've said that a number of times, and I don't know what you're talking about. And she was like, oh. And she just explained it, and I was like, huh, interesting. And then she gave me a little worksheet, and I did it, and we worked through it. And she was like, I already know what your North Star is, but I'm really interested to hear what you think your North Star is. And I was like, okay. So we went through, and I figured it out. And I was like, well, it sounds so stupid because it's not possible. I want to create more peace and balance in the world. And she's like, no, that's your North Star. And she's like, I knew that was your North Star because that's all that you talk about. And I was like, okay, but how am I going to do? And so then from that, just that moment of being like, okay, fine, that is, and I'm going to have to, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the fact that it's a really, really big goal that everybody's telling me is unattainable, but it won't go away. So I know that I have to at least try. And so this idea of having a filter, just, does this help me get closer to my goal? Yes or no? Just that simple tool changed my life.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. It was really nice listening to you talk. My question was kind of just what you talked about not knowing. What do you do, I guess, when you're faced with the decision and you don't really have your passion defined yet? You don't know exactly what your North Star is. Then how do you decide if a particular decision is actually getting you closer to something when you don't really know what that is?
That is such a good question, and I'm so happy you asked it. And I would say at this point in your lives, being in school, where you're coming from varied backgrounds and different situations, but you're in school, there's opportunities for internships, for fellowships. Study, ask questions, spend as much, if there's anything that you think you might be interested in, see if you can get in there and try it. Just try as many things as possible while you still have time. This point in your life was made to explore. So explore everything. Really, honestly, truly, if you can get to do anything abroad, that really, really opens your ability to see the world differently. I think it's so important for us to, even if that means traveling to a different city. I love to take road trips all around, and sometimes it's just an hour away. But if you're not able to travel to a different state, to a different country, you can still travel and you can still have an impact on the way that you look at the world by just trying to give yourself a different experience. If you live, I don't know, there are so many different ways. I also highly recommend volunteering. Getting to meet and interact with all different types of people, talk to people, but explore. Use this time to explore and just try things out. And you'll be surprised at what you find. I thought that I was going to be a special education teacher. I'm so incredibly thankful that I was given the opportunity to try that when I was in college as a fellowship. And I realized that it was 100% not at all what I wanted to do. I write curriculum and I do trainings for special ed, and I was the dean of special education, but being in the classroom was not a good fit for me. I wouldn't have known that. I could have spent an entire master's degree on that and then realized. So I'm I cannot stress enough how important it is to try things out before jumping fully in. Are there any other questions?
I don't know if I can throw.
Got it. Okay, actually I'll sit down again.
So I feel like my question can kind of bounce off of some other things. And actually, before I get into it, I just wanted to second down on like the trying things. One of my advisors have talked about that idea of thinking of it like prototype activities. So yeah, giving that chance to like try things early to see like, is it something I'd like? Definitely seconding that. But with my question, I feel like it can almost tie back to Katie's question of self-care and like the aspect, and I was thinking actually of also tying it back to when you talked about like revolutionary love and specifically kind of like the aspect of wonder. And I was wondering on unintentional there. But I suppose I was wondering with that, like, maybe this is a bit of a downer, but is there like ever a place where you feel like you have to draw the line there? Because I was thinking with aspects of self-care and even like considering maybe being like myself being like a woman of color and thinking about educating people like emotional labor and that sort of aspect of how much am I willing to give of myself to try to like explain to this person that maybe doesn't respect my existence why I should be doing this thing. Wondering your thoughts there.
I have so many thoughts. It's an excellent question and really important. And that's where, when I was talking about wonder, and I was saying, but never to the detriment of yourself. So this idea of wonder, there's a really beautiful quote, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, from so this book is called Revolutionary Love. It's actually called See No Stranger, a memoir on revolutionary love. Fascinating, fabulous book. Even the audio, I listened to the audio book, which the author reads, and it's just so incredibly passionate and life. I highly, highly, highly recommend. Such an incredible book. But she talks about forgiveness and how forgiveness is really, it's not for the other person, it's for you. And forgiveness frees you from hate. And it's 100% for you. You don't have to do anything for that person. Sometimes the best and most revolutionary type of love is allowing that person to be held by their own community, not interfering with that. But it is not our place to take care of, to educate, and to do the emotional labor of others. And when we're talking about, looking at and talking about things in racial justice and in that world, there's a very big conversation, and it's so incredibly important. Looking at your safety. So I do full workshops on microaggressions. How do we recognize them? How can we stop them? How can we kind of like intercept them? And what I always come back to is that often it is not the target of the microaggression that is able to stop it. That's where allyship really comes into play, because when you're in the midst of it's always a power struggle. When you're in the midst of that, it's very difficult to cut it. You can do it with wonder. So asking a question, but me being from New Jersey, we're extremely sarcastic, and it is very difficult for me to be genuine when I don't feel it. So if someone's saying something and someone's just like said a microaggression to me, the way that you would typically interrupt that is by genuinely asking a question, but I find that very hard to do. So it'd be like, oh, I heard you say blah, blah, like what makes you think that? But for me, it'd be like, so I heard you say this. Why'd you say that? That's gonna make them feel very defensive. We're not gonna have a good conversation about it. We're gonna get into an argument. So it's not the time or space for me to interrupt that microaggression because I'm feeling heated. I can interrupt a microaggression if I see something and I feel I have the space within and that it's worth my while. So is this conversation gonna benefit the other person or me and me? Or are we just gonna argue? Is this person consequential to my life? Do I need to have a relationship with them? Yes, then okay, maybe I'll have this conversation with them. Maybe not now, maybe later. Is this a stranger who just said something terrible? Am I gonna change their mind? Am I gonna have an impact? What type of impact does that have for me? So these are all those like very fast calculations that have to happen in a moment. But I like to say, like, it's really the feeling. And, like, I know in an instant if I'm able to interrupt a microaggression or if I just need to take a step back. And that's where I really encourage my white allies to step in. That's where the labor of anti-racism work comes in, I believe.
I think it's close to closing time. We can
Yes.
take one more question if somebody has a burning last question. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's give a big hand for a wonderful evening. I also want to have two quick announcements. One is we ordered some good food. Please pick one box when you leave. We are also going to have Rhonda McGee, who wrote a book, Race and Mindfulness. She'll be giving a talk in April 1st week, April 1st or 2nd week. Keep an eye for the announcement. So thanks for coming on an evening, staying this long, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. This is a QR code. If you feel up to it, I would love a little feedback. You can take a picture with your phone. Also, there will be a link in the presentation.
And we have all your emails, right? So if you want to send okay, perfect. If you don't have send email, just email Beth or leave it here. So we will be happy to send you these slides. Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is just feedback for me. It doesn't go anywhere. There is an option for you to leave a public comment if you would like to, but it's really helpful as I develop these trainings just to hear what resonated with you and what worked. So I appreciate it. Thank you.